guys, this is Rhonda. On the last video I did, we went through the Lilly Counseling Initiative, all of the funding that came in with Lilly, Bill Gates, and the training that they took from Trish Hatch and through ASCA, the American School Counselors Association. And I left off with the position statements. And so tonight, that is what we're going to go through, is the American School Counselors a position statement, which our schools were trained on through the Lilly Counseling Initiative. There's 45 different statements, and they're broken down by the ASCA position, the rationale behind it, the school counselor's role, and then there's a summary. We're not going to go through all 45, but we are going to go through some of the ones that I think you really need to be aware of. The first one we're going to go into is comprehensive school counseling programs. The position on this for the school counselor is to design and develop a program to improve student learning and behavior outcomes. The rationale is delivered to all students in a systemic fashion based on data-driven decision-making, and the school counselor role is to manage the use of data to measure program to promote the systemic change. And if you remember the last video, we talked about that systemic change. Accountability, they analyze the data to determine change in the students, use that data to show impact on the student behavior. It's all about tweaking the student's behavior and to fit what the government wants them to value, how they want them to behave, and their attitudes and beliefs. So the next one is the school counselor and cultural diversity. The rationale behind this one is the school counselor develops competencies in how prejudice, power, and various forms of oppression affect themselves, students, and the stakeholders. The school counselors ought to be more globally responsive and culturally competent in the current education and social environment. Again, who determines globally responsive and culturally competent? That would be our government. The school counselor role in a position to advocate for students regarding equity and access, to help students and families navigate oppression, injustice, and acts of agents of change within their school settings. Here's your critical race. And they're to help students and families navigate their oppression and justice. And the summary is the school counselor is to advocate and network to ensure a welcoming school environment. They're to teach tolerance and address issues of social justice on a regular basis. So this is why you're seeing a lot of the activity that's going on in Hamilton Southeastern and various others. They're to teach tolerance, and this could come in any form. This could come in the English program. It could come in through books that their kids are reading. If they're reading about racial issues, they are learning critical race theory. It's not a curriculum necessarily. It is an idea that's coming through every part of the curriculum. So this one is on equity for all students. The rationale, all students have the right to a school counselor who acts as a social justice advocate, supports students from all backgrounds. Their role is to use data to identify gaps in achievement, opportunity, and attainment, and then to promote development of school policies leading to equitable treatment of all students and opposing school policies hindering such treatment of all students. So any policies that do not conform to the social justice, critical race, those will all be policies that will be opposed by the school counselors and the administrators. They're going to advocate for all of those policies that push that agenda. Gender equity, the position on this one, the school counselors to use inclusive language and positive modeling of gender equity, removing all bias and stereotypes for all students. The rationale is become acutely aware of ways in which language affect opportunities based on gender. Their role is to use inclusive language and provide working models of gender equity and equality. Emphasize a person's competence and models positive gender equity while assisting students in positive gender identity as the students currently identify. You know where this was going. The summary is modeling of inclusive language and equal opportunity for all to break through stereotypical gender-based behaviors and expectations. School counselors actively advocate for equitable policies, procedures, practices, and attitudes that embrace equity and opportunities and access to resources for all students and all colleagues. The next one we're going to look at is the LGBTQ youth. The rationale: students report feeling unsafe due to sexual and or perceived orientation, gender identity or expression, and report homophobic remarks, harassment, and bullying. So this would be if a child does not believe in this kind of activity or this behavior, this agenda, they would be considered homophobic and a harasser and a bullier. So the school council role is to recognize harm to conversion therapy, which is a social construct, and advocate to protect LGBT students from this harm. Committed to affirming all youth regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and work to create safe and affirming schools. They're to advocate for equitable education and extracurricular opportunities regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. I think you know where that's going. Advocate for gender nonconforming students to access building facilities, restrooms, locker rooms. Promote policies that reduce the use of offensive language, harassment, and bullying. Again, if you're not going to comply, you will be considered offensive and harasser and a bullier. Provide a safe space for LGBTQ students and allies, such as a gay straight alliance or now a gender sexuality alliance. Those are clubs. And so the safe space, you will start finding flags in your child's school, in their classroom, anything that provides identification for a safe space. Okay, you're going to find that now throughout your schools. Promote sensitivity and acceptance of diversity among all students and staff to include LGBT students and diverse family systems. That would be your two moms, two dads, those family systems. They're to promote that and accept it, and everybody within the schools to do the same. Support an inclusive curriculum for all grade levels. Model inclusive language of sexual orientation and gender identity. Support students in discrimination by staff members. So if you've got a staff member who has strong religious beliefs on this issue, which many of our teachers do, they could be discriminators. Okay. And then the summary is to promote affirmation, respect, and equal opportunity for students of sexual orientation, gender identity, and encourage the same and affirming school environment. This next one, I put in here because I wanted to go over it so you guys can understand. This is what helps drive the comprehensive sexuality education, or better known as CSE. So the ASCA rationale have the opportunity and responsibility to provide students with developmentally appropriate, accurate, and current health information regarding STIs and help them develop healthy attitudes and habits. Now, let's talk about those habits for a minute. What I believe they're referring to here, healthy habits would be like any advocation for contraception, condoms, foam, various things that they can use, that they will tell them that they can protect themselves from STIs. What they will not tell them necessarily is that that's not a guarantee that you won't get one, okay? But they want to tell them they have these healthy attitudes and habits if they practice safer sex, not avoidance and abstinence, which is our state law. School counselors are in a position to provide education and prevention information to students and families. And then their role is to advocate for equity and access to educational opportunities and healthcare, maintenance, and referral to available resources. No doubt some of those available resources would be Planned Parenthood. Advocate and provide for STI education curriculum. So they're to push the CSE comprehensive sexuality education. The next one is promotion of safe schools. The position is promote anti-bullying harassment programs school-wide, positive behavior interventions and support, foster a positive school climate. And then the role is to advocate for state and national policies, support safe schools, anti-bullying and harassment using data that they're collecting on the kids and their attitudes. So all those surveys that your kids are getting, they're taking that information, and depending on how your student answers those questions, then they will use that to push state and national policies, which we are starting to see at the State House and nationally. They advocate for peacefully resolving issues such as acceptance of differences, intervention strategies for bullying and harassment, and community involvement. So this is nothing more than promoting the Human Rights Campaign Safe Schools, Welcoming Schools program into our individual classrooms. So here's where it takes social emotional learning into the next ring, the outer ring, as you look at Jennifer's presentations that those of you who have been to her conferences, she talks about how it develops in the classroom, then it goes to the school, throughout the school, the next ring, and then the next ring I think is families, the next ring is the communities. This is where you start to seeing the exposure because it starts coming into the families. So the position here is promote, facilitate, and advocate for collaboration with parents, guardians, and community stakeholders. The rationale is enhance the collaboration of those three: school, family, community. And that school counselor role is to actively pursue collaboration with family members and community stakeholders. So they're going to push this entire agenda out into your family. Your family is going to be coerced or forced to comply, and then the entire community will be manipulated to embrace this entire agenda. They're to remove any barriers to successful implementation of school-family community partnership. Question is, what would they consider a barrier? That's what I would like to know. Anybody who opposes the agenda, more than likely. This one here is student mental health. The rationale: school-based mental health and behavioral services are essential. School counselor role is to provide internal and external referral procedures, short-term counseling or crisis prevention focused on mental health. Provide school-based prevention and universal interventions and targeted interventions for students with mental health and behavioral health concerns. Advocate, collaborate, and coordinate with school and community stakeholders to ensure students and families have access to mental health services. Direct students and parents to school and or community resources for additional assistance through referrals that treat mental health issues. And I would just like to say that, we realize that there are always situations where it's beneficial to get a counseling for a student and maybe a family. However, if you take a look at the video I did on the 45 communist goals, you will understand that the communist agenda has infiltrated the whole field of mental health, and purposefully so. And now we're seeing it pushed into the schools. So now you've got communist designed manipulation infiltrating the schools to control the students' mental health. The next one is transgender, gender nonconforming youth. The position on this one, the school counselors work to safeguard the well-being of transgender and gender nonconforming youth. The rationale is to recognize the goal to ensure the safety, comfort, and healthy development of all students, maximizing inclusion and social integration while minimizing exclusion and stigmatization. So what that would mean to me is you maximize inclusion, which means you force this agenda, you force this confusion on all the school and social integration, while you minimize the exclusion, which would be any child who's growing up in a family who does not believe in this agenda, does not believe in this ideology or this perversion, if you will, and they will minimize that. So your child will be forced to conform, they will be forced to comply with being an ally and advocate for this agenda. The school counselor role is to recognize determination of students' gender identity rests with the student, okay, not necessarily the parents, but the student. Promote the use of best practices to inform their support for transgender and gender nonconforming students, such as the following: names and pronouns. So your student, should they be transitioning at school, the school can change the names and pronouns, and you may or may not know. Student records, privacy and confidentiality regarding disclosure. That includes you, parents. They may or may not tell you. Restrooms, locker rooms, or changing facilities, physical education classes and intramural sports, interscholastic sports, dress code, and gender-based activities or practices. So this is the last one I wanted to end on because this is a big one. We're starting to see, or have been for some time, schools that are implementing this policy in their restrooms, and there's been a big explosion over it. So parents are not necessarily made aware of it when it happens. They find out later on after the school has already implemented the policy. But what I want you to understand is, because of the Lilly Counseling Initiative, these were the position statements that our schools were trained on. We have the screenshots of Trish Hatch from Twitter bragging about, training all of our schools and our teachers and admin back here, and they did delve into these position statements. So just wanted you guys to be aware that this is the next step of exposing this for you, and we hope that you take the opportunity to go onto American School Counselors Association website, ASCA, and look into all these position statements. Like I said, there's many of them. There's one relating to guns and the Second Amendment, and take a look at them and get a better grasp as to what exactly is happening and how it was coming into the schools. So until next time, see you guys later.